So, season 1 of Breaking Bad was a good start, and here we are with the subsequent few seasons. So first things first, why am I reviewing 3 seasons in one video? Well, pretty similar to why I reviewed season 4 and 5 of The Wire in the same video. Rather than do a review after each season, I kinda lost my discipline and ploughed ahead without stopping for a review, and now the line between the seasons is a bit blurred, and it's just easier to do it all in one review. I finished season 4, haven't started season 5 yet, and it seems like a good place to do a review. In fact, the end of season 4 would have made a good conclusion to the entire series, and I read that it was actually shot as a series finale, as they didn't know if they were going to be renewed for a 5th season. Anyway, as I mentioned in my review of season 1, the first season of Breaking Bad ends in a bit of a weird place, pretty much in the middle of the story. The second episode of season 2 feels like the true conclusion to the season. A fantastic episode full of thrills, suspense, and tension, which brings a conclusion to the Tuco storyline. It was a wild series of events that saw both Walter and Jesse escape with their lives and a chunky amount of money, and subsequently, throughout the duration of season 2, we spend more time on the domestic side of things, like the increasing mistrust and distrust Skylar has of Walt, with his constant disappearances and shady activities, and Jesse ends up in a doomed relationship with his landlady, a recovering addict. It feels like a transitional season of sorts, with Walter and Jesse more or less having achieved what they needed to in season 1. Part of this season's purpose is to get them back into the game, get them cooking again, almost as if the showrunners knew they'd been greenlit an entire show instead of one season, so now needed to find a way where Walter would start cooking again. Once this is achieved, Walter and Jesse create their own little empire using friends Jesse has, which leads on to the kind of storylines you'd expect with low-level drug dealers. Turf wars, inadequate employees, messing things up, that kind of stuff. Season 2 introduces fan-favourite character Saul Goodman, a crafty, charismatic lawyer who is such a compelling character that he got his own spin-off show, which ran longer than Breaking Bad itself. In fact, a big reason why I chose to watch Breaking Bad after The Wire is because of Better Call Saul, as I thought it looked really interesting. In fact, I was more interested in seeing that than Breaking Bad. One character to get his own juicy storyline is Hank, who is promoted to a position that has him out of his element and struggling, and it messes him up psychologically. His encounters with members of the cartel end up coming back to bite him in season 3 when he is attacked and shot, subsequently spending much of the season bedridden and becoming increasingly depressed and agitated. His wife Marie, it's quite strange actually. She's massively toned down from season 1. She's basically a different character. She's relatable, you feel sympathy for her, and she's an all-round decent person. It's like the showrunners thought, we can't have both of these sisters be bitchy, so they gave most of Marie's narcissistic qualities to Skylar for her to use in her mental war games with Walter. Gustavo Fring is also introduced in season 2, as is his cool enforcer Mike. Gus is a major narcotics distributor who uses legitimate businesses to front his operations. There's mutual benefit in Walt and Jesse working for Gus, though he is not keen on Jesse with, him being a drug dealer. Walter is valuable to Gus due to his ability to cook the best crystal, but Walt demands Jesse be his partner and get a paycheck, as Jesse is threatening to end Walter's brother-in-law's career after he is beaten up by Hank. It's complicated, but things end up in a place where Gus mules over whether it's even worth keeping Walter himself around. Gus is something of the big bad guy of Breaking Bad, a dangerous and powerful man who Walt struggles to keep happy, until things all boil over in season 4, with the entire season essentially being a thrilling climax to the build-up of season 2 and 3. He reminds me of Kopek of Resurrection Ertugrul, with both characters introduced in the second season of their shows, both men being of high influence in the legitimate world and being shady powerhouses operating from the shadows in the illegitimate world, and both essentially ending up as all-out antagonists whose storylines bow out in the 4th season. The relationship between Walt and Jesse themselves is often explored heavily, pretty much in every season, with it ranging from them committing life-changing acts to protect one another, to repeatedly punching each other in the face. It's a complicated relationship, constantly threatening to collapse, especially with the characters' personalities evolving, but ultimately quite endearing. At the end of season 3, Walter manages to maneuver out of a situation that would have led to Gus having killed him. So he goes back to work for his disgruntled employer, knowing that as soon as he becomes expendable, he will be taken out. Meanwhile, Jesse is essentially groomed by Gus and Mike, being sent with the enforcer on jobs where he's something of a bodyguard, in spite of Gus thinking the guy's a loser. It's all a bit weird, and you get the feeling, as does Walt, that Gus is trying to manipulate Jesse into turning against Walt, being okay with his murder, and then he can take over the cook after Walter is dead. Ultimately, all hands are revealed and things get explosive in season 4. Oh, and Walt and Skylar buy a car wash. So in terms of the individual seasons themselves, I thought they were all good, and none stood out as particularly bad or good, relatively. Maybe season 4, which was really suspenseful and had loads of good shocks and thrills. Like I said, it was basically the climax to everything that had come before. The scale and scope was greater, but the other 2 seasons had great moments also, and they probably did more with the family and their dynamic. In any case, I thought all 3 seasons were better than the first. This is a fine series. Its purpose seems to be to provide audiences with wow moments, for us to be shocked, for us to be on the edge of our seat, biting our nails, and it does what it says on the tin. With that being said, I have to admit, I don't actually think Breaking Bad is all that great. It's fine for what it is, and it really is an entertaining show. But for something that is touted as the greatest TV show of all time, I really expected better. It definitely is not the greatest show of all time. Maybe it's because I just watched The Wire, which raised the bar, but I just kind of feel that Breaking Bad is good Saturday night entertainment, television at its most entertaining, a show that values shock factor, but nothing much more. It's not particularly layered or deep. The incentive to watch is mainly wondering what happens next, and how will our characters get out of this sticky situation. I don't feel there will be much rewatch value either. I think, to be honest, the show suffers from its own success. Had this been some random, obscure series that I discovered, I'd probably be singing its praises. But because it's often talked about in the same breath as The Sopranos, which is on a completely different level, it just doesn't live up to the hype. And I know that's on me, not the show. In fact, I actually have a video planned, which I've actually finished, on how our expectations of a movie can make or break it, with the movie's actual quality remaining the same. It's the same here. Because of the show's reputation, I prepared myself for a series that never came. I must have just been expecting a different kind of show, or one with a bit more complexity, or something to say. But this isn't that kind of show. It isn't The Sopranos or The Wire. It's pure fun, I would say. That's probably the word I would use. Without trying to sound big-headed or elitist, I think the kind of people who come home from a hard days of work and are tired and looking to chill and enjoy themselves with a show are the kind of people who would call this the best show ever made. And that's fine. But look at the kind of videos I make on The Sopranos and The Wire. Why did Butch turn on Phil? Why did the Greeks choose Marlo over Joe? The deeper reasons why Tony took out Chris. That's where my interests lie, exploring the richness of the characterization and the themes of shows. But it has to have that deep characterization and thematic resonance in the first place. Breaking Bad just doesn't have much of that. It all feels pretty surface level. Where the show does make an attempt to have that kind of depth, it almost feels like it's patting itself on the back for the slightest effort. Like one bottle episode where Walter spends the entire episode trying to get rid of a fly in his lab. This episode is basically an allegory, but did it really need an entire episode to make its point? Again, like I said, it's wrong to judge the series based on its reputation. I should judge it based on its own merit. But even then, I do have problems with Breaking Bad. For one, it's really predictable. Maybe I've just seen too many movies or something, I don't know. But again, I'm not trying to sound big-headed or anything, or look how amazing I am. This really is the case that I could actually very easily work out where plots were going, what was going to happen in certain scenes, even work out what line of dialogue was going to be spoken next in some instances. And it wasn't me being some killjoy trying to work out everything before it happened. It's just that's how predictable I found the show. Big things, like thinking Gus had poison in the wine he gave to the cartel leader, and that he was going to have an excuse to go out and puke what he swallowed with a subsequent battle to stay alive. I thought all of that was going to happen. There's other stuff like knowing where the scene where Skylar haggles on the phone over the cost of the car wash with the Romanian owner was going, right down to this sitcom-like timing of when the guy phoned back accepting her terms. There's a part where Walter and Jesse are talking about Gus's weird behavior, if I remember correctly, and I thought Walt would say something like, maybe it's a setup. Seconds before he said what I was thinking, word for word. And then, weirdly, there was a part where Gale was doing some stuff in his apartment, and because of where the camera was positioned in relation to him and his front door, I knew someone was going to knock on it or break it down. Even little things like that. I don't know, the show is just too obvious sometimes. The times it isn't are when it throws massive plot twists at you which intentionally subvert your expectations, with characters doing things for the sake of the plot rather than the plot moving around the characters, and thus it makes it difficult for you as a viewer to work out what the nature of a character is. Characters acting out of sorts at all times doesn't make them more complex, it just makes the writing feel lazier. Apart from the surprises, surprisingly, there aren't actually that many surprises. That's not to say there isn't material to make you think, like one part where almost supernaturally Gus chooses not to get in a car that has a bomb in it, which at first comes off as lazy writing, but then when we discover he didn't actually poison that kid, people who have seen the show know what I'm talking about, you realise he knows something is afoot and his senses are heightened. It would have been nice to see more of that kind of stuff. Also, the show's plot is ridiculously contrived. I mean, it does take place in a heightened reality, I get that. I'm not expecting a documentary-style show, but things like the killer twins arriving at Walter's house just as soon as Mike is leaving, so then he can inform his boss and stop the twins. I mean, what were the chances of that happening, them arriving at exactly that time? And it is, dare I say it, a little bit boring. The editing, I think, could have been tightened up. There's scenes that drone on and outstay their welcome, long after the point of the scene has been established. Like, Skylar might find out that her boss is cooking the account numbers in his business, and there'll be a back and forward between them. I mean, I get it. They're trying to show us how Skylar would potentially react if she found out about Walt being involved in drug dealing. But the scene will be so long, and just go on, and there might be a few follow-up scenes just to hammer home the point. So all in all, I do like this show, I do find it entertaining, but ultimately, it comes off as fluff without much substance, without anything to say. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a show that just wants to entertain you with cool characters and crazy plots. But perhaps what I had heard of Breaking Bad affected my enjoyment of it. Thanks for watching.